She thought it was a Halloween party, dressed like a stripper cop as a joke, and got the address wrong. She walked into a room full of mafia men. And the boss? He smiled and said, "Perfect timing. We needed some entertainment." She tried to leave. He locked the door. "You're not going anywhere, officer." Mia stood frozen in a room full of dangerous men. 20 guns. One boss. And she was dressed like a stripper cop. 30 minutes earlier. The costume was a mistake. Mia knew it the second she put it on. Black leather that clung to every curve. Shorts so short they barely existed. A top that was more suggestion than coverage. Fishnets. Heels that made her legs look endless. A police cap that screamed fantasy. It was the kind of outfit that demanded attention, which was exactly what she usually hated. But tonight wasn't about being herself. It was about finally being seen. Her phone buzzed. "Ashley, where are you?" "Jake's asking about you. Get here now. Dress code is strict. Go all out or don't bother." Mia stared at herself in the mirror. She looked like every man's fantasy. Like sin wrapped in leather. Perfect. She grabbed her long, black trench coat and left before she could change her mind. She hailed a cab, giving the address for the party she was supposed to be at, the high-rise where Jake, her longtime crush, was hosting a ridiculous, over-the-top Halloween bash. Her heart hammered with a blend of nervousness and defiance. She'd spent too long being the quiet girl in the corner. Tonight, she was the main event. The building was all glass and expensive silence. It wasn't the exact address she'd expected, but high-rise party venues all blurred together in this part of the city. The doorman's eyes widened when he saw the flash of leather under her coat as she adjusted it. "Penthouse party?" she asked, trying to sound confident. He nodded slowly, like he knew something she didn't. The elevator ride felt endless. Mia fixed her costume, pulled the shorts down, adjusted the top. Nothing helped. She was practically naked beneath the coat. The car climbed past the floors where sensible people lived, rising toward the city's silent, glittering apex. She gripped her purse, rehearsing her bright, carefree greeting for Jake. The doors opened to a quiet hallway. No music. No laughter. No thumping bass vibrating through the walls. Just expensive silence and deep red carpet. Wrong. But the number on the door matched the text. Jake must have hired a soundproof floor, she reasoned, desperate not to have wasted the agonizing effort of choosing this outfit. One door. She knocked. "Enter." It was a sharp, low voice laced with authority, not the drunken, booming welcome she expected. She paused, then pushed it open with her brightest smile. The smile died. 20 men. Suits. Dark, tailored, and unforgiving. Not a single mask or costume in sight. Guns on the heavy mahogany table like paperweights. Documents spread out. Blood a dark, sticky smear on someone's knuckles. Cigarette smoke hung thick in the air. Not a party. A meeting. A crisis meeting. Every eye turned to her. Raked over her body. The leather. The skin. The fantasy she'd dressed herself as. Dead silence. At the head of the table, the boss set down his whiskey glass. Young. Late 20s. Korean. Sharp cheekbones and a jawline that could cut glass. Tattoos, bold, dark script and ancient symbols, crawling up his neck and disappearing under his collar. Eyes that could strip skin from bone. He studied her. Slow. Deliberate. Like he was memorizing every inch of her, cataloging her as an unexpected variable in his equation. His lips curved. A slow, predatory smile that was less amusement and more a silent, dangerous calculation. "Gentlemen, it seems someone hired entertainment for the evening. How thoughtful." The men laughed. Dark, hungry sounds that made Mia's blood run cold. She could feel the heat of their attention, and it felt nothing like the flattering look she'd hoped for from Jake. It felt like being assessed by a pack of wolves. Mia backed toward the door. "Wrong room. I'm so sorry." Click. The sound of the lock engaging was final, metallic, and terrifying. She spun. Tried the handle. Nothing. "Oh no," the boss said, standing. His movement was fluid, effortless, and terrifyingly fast. "You don't get to leave. Not dressed like that. Not after walking into my private meeting." He moved toward her with predatory grace. Mia pressed her back against the door, the cold metal a stark contrast to the sudden, overwhelming heat of panic. He stopped close. Too close. She could smell expensive cologne. Whiskey. Something darker underneath. Maybe gun oil. Maybe just pure danger. "What's your name, officer?" His eyes dragged down her body. Slow. Possessive. like he had every right to look. Her mind raced. If she said wrong address, they'd think spy. If she ran, couldn't. The door was locked. If she screamed, no one would hear her on this floor. Does it matter? She managed, her voice shaking but holding a thread of defiance she didn't know she possessed. His eyes snapped to hers. A spark of something flickered there. Approval. Smart girl. You understand your situation. He circled her. She felt his gaze on every exposed inch. The curve of her spine. Her legs in those fishnets. The way the leather clung. It was a physical inspection, an absolute and ruthless assessment of her worth as a threat, a liability, or a distraction. He stopped behind her. She felt his breath on her neck. You walked into a room full of wolves, he murmured near her ear. Wearing this. His finger traced the edge of her leather top. Not touching skin. Just leather. What did you think would happen? Her breath caught. I made a mistake. Yes. You did. He came around to face her again. The casual intensity of his gaze was unbearable. The stakes in this room were higher than she could comprehend, and she was the unexpected, utterly exposed element. Now I have to decide what to do with you. Let me go. Can't. You've seen too much. I won't tell anyone. They never do. Until they do. He reached out. She flinched. He paused, then gently adjusted the police cap on her head. His fingers brushed her temple. There. Perfect little cop. He returned to his seat, picking up a heavy binder. He didn't gesture to the men to kill her. He didn't even dismiss her. He simply looked at the table, then back at her. Clear the documents, he told his men. Our guest needs space to wait. The two men closest to the table quickly gathered the papers. One of them met her eye and his dark, hungry gaze stripped away her remaining composure. I'm not waiting for anything. He leaned forward. All pretense of gentleness gone. You have two choices. Sit quietly. Or I let my men decide how to handle your mistake. And trust me, officer. You want the first option. The room went cold. Mia understood with chilling certainty that her terror was his control. I'm waiting for your answer, he said. Sit quietly, she managed, her hands shaking so badly she shoved them into her coat pockets. Good choice. He gestured to a leather armchair away from the table, near the windows. Go. She walked to the chair on shaking legs. He tossed his dark gray suit jacket to her, his movements economical and precise. Cover yourself. You're distracting my men. She snatched it up, pulled it on. The jacket was heavy, tailored wool that fell to her knees, swallowing her tiny costume. It smelled like him, expensive cologne, clean linen, and that hint of something dark and intoxicating. She shouldn't find that comforting, but the unexpected weight of the fabric felt like a physical shield against the 20 pairs of eyes. The meeting resumed. Korean. Names, numbers, and territory. A conversation of high-stakes power she didn't understand. She only knew the man at the head of the table, the one they called Ji-Hoon, was losing something important. The language was fast, aggressive, and punctuated by sharp arguments. She realized what the meeting was about when a thin, nervous man stood up, gesturing to Ji-Hoon's empty right-hand chair. The family is clear, sir. You cannot lead if you cannot provide an heir. The succession must be secured. Young Dae-hyun is ready to step in, as the rules allow. Ji-Hoon slammed his hand flat on the table. The sound echoed like a gunshot. The rules state my blood. The family council has given me 30 more days. 30 days to produce what your doctors said was impossible? The nervous man challenged, before quickly sitting down when one of Ji-Hoon's guards stepped forward. The pieces clicked into place. This wasn't just a business meeting. This was a war for control, and Ji-Hoon was fighting it alone, armed only with a technicality and a crippling secret. He was infertile. For 3 years, every doctor had told him the same thing. An old childhood illness, compounded by a youthful accident, had left him with virtually no hope of ever fathering a child. His family was ready to replace him. His rivals were circling. And he was about to lose everything his life was built on. And then she walked through that door dressed like a fantasy, and something primal in him, a flicker of desperate, illogical hope, said mine. Mia kept her eyes down, but she felt his gaze on her. Constantly. Like he was aware of every breath she took, every tiny movement. He was tense, coiled, ready to explode. She was a minor distraction, a vulnerability he couldn't afford but hadn't eliminated. Then the windows exploded. Glass. Gunfire. Screaming. The sound was deafening, the penthouse suddenly filling with the smell of smoke and cordite. Ji-Hoon moved like lightning. He didn't look at his men or his documents. He looked at Mia, grabbed her wrist, dragged her from the chair, and threw her to the floor. His body covered hers completely, a heavy, solid, protective shield. "Don't move," he commanded, his voice muffled against her ear. His weight pressed her down into the carpet. Protective. Possessive. "Don't scream." Gunfire raged outside, the sounds of his men returning fire echoing in the chaos. She felt every muscle in his body. Hard. Coiled. Ready. He was a force of nature, a machine designed for violence. He reached over her head, never lifting his weight entirely. Fired 3 shots. 3 heavy thuds sounded near the door. The sound of a falling body. His hand cupped the back of her head, pressing her face against his chest. "Breathe, Mia. Just breathe." She hadn't told him her name. The shooting stopped as abruptly as it began. Silence, broken only by shallow, panting breaths and the slow drip of blood. He pulled her up. Bodies everywhere. Blood pooling on the expensive carpet. Ji-Hoon was bleeding. A dark, wet stain was spreading fast on his shoulder. He didn't even notice. "We're leaving. Now." He grabbed her wrist, dragged her through the carnage. Into a service stairwell. Down, down, down. His grip never loosened. It wasn't gentle, but it was absolute. He wasn't letting her go. They burst out the basement door into a waiting black car. She fell onto the leather seat, shaking violently, adrenaline and sheer terror turning her legs to water. Ji-Hoon slid in beside her, gave a curt order in Korean, and the car sped into the night. He pulled her against his chest, one arm clamped around her waist like a vice. His presence was overwhelming, his blood hot and sticky against his borrowed jacket. "You're safe." His hand was in her hair. Not sexual. Claiming. "I've got you." She shouldn't feel safe. This man was a criminal. He had just killed men and saved her life in the same breath. Yet, against the violent, thumping rhythm of his heart, she did. The car stopped at another building, one that looked like a fortress disguised as a luxury apartment. He dragged her out and into an elevator, pressing the highest button. Inside the penthouse, he slammed the door shut and finally released her. She stumbled back, hitting the wall, breathing hard. He leaned against the door, his chest heaving. "Who sent you?" he demanded, his voice rough. "No one," she gasped. "I told you. Wrong party. Wrong building. I was trying to find Jake's Halloween party." He studied her, his eyes blazing, searching for the lie. He looked at her ridiculous, tiny costume beneath his enormous jacket, at her trembling body, and at the raw, undisguised terror in her eyes. The anger seemed to drain out, leaving only exhaustion and the pain from his wound. "Get to a guest room," he ordered, pulling off his blood-soaked shirt without ceremony. The tattoos on his neck continued down his arm and across his broad chest, weaving through angry white scars. "I'll have someone bring you clothes. You stay here." "But, stay," he repeated, his voice low and final. He walked into an adjoining room, presumably to deal with his wound. Mia was left alone in the dark, silent living room. She was wearing his jacket, his blood on her hand, and the sound of gunshots still echoing in her head. She was trapped in the apartment of a man who was about to lose his empire and who had just claimed her as his own. She found the guest room. The walls were a quiet, expensive cream. The bed was enormous. She stripped off the leather costume and the fishnets, throwing them into a corner like discarded evidence. They were the reason she was here. She put on the clean, soft cotton shirt and thick sweatpants that a silently efficient woman dropped off an hour later. They were simple, oversized, and smelled faintly of expensive laundry detergent and him. She fell into the deep mattress and finally, thankfully, passed out. Mia woke to darkness and the feeling of being watched. She sat up. Ji-Hoon stood in the doorway, shirtless, tattoos and scars catching the dim light. A clean patch was taped tightly over his left shoulder. "You were having a nightmare," he said. "Was I?" "You were calling for help." She didn't remember. "I'm fine." "You're not." He moved into the room, sat on the edge of the bed. "Close. You saw people die tonight. That's not something you just get over. You seem fine. I've had practice." His hand reached out, tucked hair behind her ear. The gesture was gentle, intimate. "You shouldn't have to get used to violence. You should be at parties. Living. Not hiding in a criminal's apartment. And yet here I am. Here you are." His eyes traced her face. "Still wearing my clothes. They're comfortable. They look good on you." His voice dropped. "Rougher. Everything I own on your skin. Covering what that costume showed." Heat flooded her. "Ji-Hoon." I haven't stopped thinking about it. The way you looked walking into that room. Every man in there wanted you. And he stopped. Jaw clenched. What? I wanted to kill every single one of them for looking at you like that. Her breath caught. Why? Because the second I saw you, something in my head said mine. And I don't share what's mine. I'm not yours. No, you're not. His hand slid along her jaw, tilted her face up. But you could be. Is that a threat? It's a warning. Because the longer you're here, the harder it's going to be to let you go. And I'm trying, Mia. I'm trying to be the good guy who protects you and sends you home. But you keep looking at me like what? Like you're not afraid of me. Maybe I'm not. You should be. His thumb brushed her lower lip. I'm a killer. A criminal. Everything your mother warned you about. My mother's not here. Lucky for me. He leaned closer. Tell me to stop. Stop what? This. His forehead touched hers. Tell me you don't feel it. This thing between us. She couldn't. Because she did feel it. This magnetic pull. This dangerous attraction. It wasn't rational. It wasn't safe. It was simply true. I feel it, she whispered. Then we're both fucked. He kissed her. Not gentle. Not asking permission. Claiming. His hand fisted in her hair. Angled her head. Deepened the kiss until she couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only feel. She grabbed his shoulders. All that bare skin and hard muscle under her fingers. He groaned against her mouth. Pulled her closer. Until she was in his lap. Straddling him. His hands slid under the shirt she was wearing. Found bare skin. Traced her spine. She gasped into his mouth. He pulled back just enough to look at her. Eyes dark. Dangerous. Last chance to run. I don't want to run. Then hold on. He flipped them. She was on her back. He was over her. Pressing her into the mattress with his weight. This is insane, she breathed. Completely. His mouth moved to her neck. Found the spot that made her arch. You walked into my meeting dressed like sin. Now you're in my bed. Wearing my clothes. Smelling like me. Ji-Hoon. Say my name again. Ji-Hoon. He groaned. His mouth claimed hers again. Harder. Desperate. It was a kiss of a man who knew he was losing his world, but was taking something back. One night. One moment of impossible, dangerous connection. That passionate, desperate night together was the point of no return. It was the moment the impossible began. The sun had not yet risen, but a cold, metallic gray light was leaching through the penthouse windows. Mia woke alone. The spot next to her where Ji-Hoon had been was cool, the sheets only barely disturbed. She sat up, pulling the borrowed shirt, the one that smelled like him, tighter around her. The room felt wrong now. It had been a sanctuary from the violence, but now it was just a cage. The memory of the night before, the desperate touches, the whispered intensity, the dangerous, intoxicating feeling of being completely possessed, flooded her, making her cheeks burn. It hadn't been safe. It hadn't been logical. It had been necessary. She found him in the living room, fully dressed in black, looking sharp, lethal, and utterly defeated. He was standing by the massive window overlooking the sleeping city, a steaming mug in his hand. The patch on his shoulder was crisp and white. He was already a different man from the one who had held her with desperate urgency hours earlier. You should have stayed asleep, he said without turning around, his voice flat. Mia walked toward him, pulling the shirt down self-consciously. I can't. Not here. Not after. Stop. He finally turned, his eyes hard and carefully blank. Forget it. Forget it, she repeated, shocked. Ji-Hoon, we were almost killed. And then we. It was a reaction to trauma, Mia. Nothing more. I was under stress. You were terrified. It was a release, a moment of poor judgment. He spoke with the cold precision of a man rewriting history to survive. It meant nothing. The words felt like a physical blow, stripping away the dangerous warmth that had enveloped her all night. You said you didn't want to let me go, she whispered, the memory of his raw need stinging. I said a lot of things. I was wounded, tired, and about to lose my family's entire empire. I'm not some romantic fool, Mia. I'm a criminal leader, and I am currently failing to uphold my duties. He gestured toward the horizon. My rivals are circling. My own family is preparing a vote to replace me. And the only thing they care about is legacy. An heir. He finally took a step closer, and the weight of his defeat seemed to settle on him like a shroud. This was the moment of vulnerability she hadn't seen last night. The reason he looked so broken beneath his tailored suit. That meeting you stumbled into? The nervous man was right, he continued, his voice barely a murmur. The only thing that secures my position is a son. The only thing that saves me from losing my life is a direct bloodline. And for 3 years, every doctor has confirmed the diagnosis. I cannot produce one. He looked her straight in the eye, and the pain in his gaze was raw. I am sterile, Mia. I'm being replaced because I'm a dead end. She stared at him, suddenly seeing the desperation behind his earlier possessive claim. He hadn't just desired her. He'd needed a connection, a moment of humanity before the cold walls of his empire closed in. I see, she said quietly. Thank you for telling me. He nodded, relief flashing across his face that she hadn't pressed him, hadn't clung to the fantasy. Now you understand why you need to leave. You know too much, but you're a civilian. You have nothing to do with this life. He walked to a secure panel on the wall, punching in a code. The panel slid back, revealing a thick stack of cash. He pulled a few bundles out. Take this, he said, pushing the money into her hands. It will cover your expenses, your therapy, anything you need to disappear for a while. You go home. You erase this night. You forget me. She looked at the money, then at him. I don't want your money, Ji-Hoon. Take it anyway. For security. He didn't wait for her to argue. He was already walking toward the door, speaking curtly into his phone in Korean. He stopped, his hand on the door handle, and looked back at her one last time. His eyes lingered on her face, then dropped to the oversized shirt she was wearing. For a brief second, the intensity returned, the possessive look of the night before. Go live your life, Mia, he commanded, his voice tight. The person you spent the night with doesn't exist outside of that room. He is a criminal. He is chaos. You deserve quiet, and you deserve safe. Don't look back. He opened the door. One of his guards was waiting. See her out. Ensure she gets a cab and is not followed, Ji-Hoon ordered. He didn't look at Mia again. Mia clutched the heavy shirt and the unwanted money. She walked past him, a quiet, sharp ache settling in her chest. She had walked into a fantasy and left with nothing but cold, hard reality and the sudden, aching loss of a man she knew she should fear. She stepped into the hallway, and the door clicked shut behind her. Final. Absolute. She was free, confused, and profoundly hurt. He had been desperate, broken, and dangerously compelling, but he had chosen his empire over her. She left the building and walked into the early morning light, shedding the memory of the leather costume and the dangerous man like old skin. Ji-Hoon returned to his crisis. He spent the next month fighting a losing battle against his cousin Dae-hyun, who was expertly leveraging the no heir issue against him. Every move he made was met with skepticism from the family elders. He threw himself into work, burying the memory of the girl in the ridiculous costume and the impossible heat of that night under piles of contracts and violence. It was easier to be the ruthless leader than the man who had admitted his greatest failure to a stranger. Meanwhile, Mia tried to return to her life. She saw Jake a few times, but the thought of him, the simple, gentle, safe college crush, felt dull and pale compared to the memory of Ji-Hoon's intensity. She stopped wearing the bright colors she usually favored, choosing the sharp, tailored black of the jacket she'd left behind, a strange, subconscious echo of him. 6 weeks later, she felt sick. It was nothing serious at first, just a metallic taste in her mouth and a persistent, low nausea in the mornings. She attributed it to stress, to the residual trauma from the shooting. But the sickness persisted. She was late. Impossible, she thought. Absolutely impossible. She was always careful. Besides, Ji-Hoon had told her himself, he was sterile. This was stress, but curiosity and a growing knot of anxiety won. She bought a test at the pharmacy, hiding it deep in her shopping bag. She took the test late that afternoon. She set the digital timer and waited, pacing the small confines of her bathroom. The timer beeped. She picked it up. Positive. Panic was a cold flood through her veins. She ripped open the box, pulled out the paper instructions, and scanned the text. 2 lines means positive. Pregnant. This is impossible. Ji-Hoon's face swam into her mind, etched with the pain of his medical failure. I cannot produce one. I am sterile, Mia. And yet, here was the proof. A miracle. An absolute, biological impossibility born from a single night of desperate, traumatic passion. She threw on her coat, ready to find him, ready to confirm the impossible. She went back to the high-rise, but the doorman simply frowned. Mr. Ji-Hoon? He hasn't been here for weeks, ma'am. He keeps multiple residences now. Security is tight. He's difficult to reach. Mia tried the other buildings, the only names she had ever heard him mention. Nothing. Ji-Hoon, true to his word, had disappeared back into his closed world, leaving no forwarding address, no trace. She was pregnant, alone, and holding the only thing that could save a man who had already chosen to forget her. The next few months were a blur of cold panic and determined acceptance. She quit her job, moved into a tiny apartment, and started painting again, channeling the impossible chaos into sharp, dark canvases. The fear that he would be angry, or worse, that he would claim the child and reject her, kept her silent. She couldn't risk losing this baby, this tiny, breathing miracle. 8 months later, the impossible miracle was born. It was a boy. He had Mia's soft brown hair and small, perfect fingers. But his eyes were all his father. Sharp, dark, intense, and hooded with a knowing look that seemed too old for a newborn. She looked at her son, and she knew she had to tell him. This wasn't just her child. This was his heir. This was the key to his life, his empire, his survival. She couldn't selfishly keep the secret that could pull him back from the brink. She spent the next few weeks working the phones, calling every business associate, every acquaintance, until she found the one person who knew where the final family council meeting would be held. The date was set. Tonight, Ji-Hoon was about to be formally removed. His cousin Dae-hyun was taking over. The final vote had been called. Ji-Hoon had accepted defeat, canceling all plans, preparing for the quiet, violent end of his leadership. If he couldn't have an heir, he didn't deserve to lead. Mia dressed in her sharpest black dress, leaving the ridiculous, forgotten leather costume and the life it represented far behind. She strapped the baby securely to her chest. She had no plan, only the conviction that she had to be there. The cab pulled up to the familiar glass tower. It was the same building, the same expensive silence, the same high-security doorman who recognized her instantly, his eyes widening in shock. "Ma'am, you can't. I'm here to see Ji-Hoon," she said, her voice stronger than she felt. "It's about the succession." She took the elevator up, the baby sleeping peacefully against her chest. When the doors opened, the sound was the same low, intense drone of men arguing in Korean. She walked into the penthouse. Same layout, same mahogany table, same air of crisis and finality. But this time, it was a formal family meeting. 50 men in impeccable suits, all looking grim. Dae-hyun, the cousin, was standing mid-speech, his face twisted with triumph. "The bloodline is broken. Ji-Hoon has failed to secure the legacy. The council must vote tonight." He stopped. Everyone stopped. Mia stood in the doorway. She was wearing a simple, tailored dress, but she held the silent power of a person who knew a devastating secret. She walked forward, the weight of the baby in her arms anchoring her. Ji-Hoon sat at the head of the table, his face drawn, his eyes tired, having already accepted the end. He looked up, sensing the shift in the room's energy. He saw her. Shock. Not the terrified girl in the costume. Not the woman he'd kissed goodbye. But a woman with purpose, with darkness under her eyes and a small, sleeping bundle strapped to her chest. Every eye turned to her. 50 pairs of eyes raked over her, then settled on the baby. Mia walked to the table, her steps echoing in the sudden, deep silence. Ji-Hoon didn't move. He didn't speak. He just stared. "We need to talk, Ji-Hoon," she said, her voice clear and carrying over the stunned silence of the most powerful men in the city. The shock in the room was a physical thing, suffocating the air. Ji-Hoon's exhaustion was instantly replaced by a sharp, electrifying tension. He stared at Mia, not just at her face, but at the small, perfect head nestled against her chest. The silent power struggle between him and his cousin, Dae-hyun, evaporated in the face of this impossible intrusion. Mia didn't wait for permission. She walked to the back of the room, near where Ji-Hoon sat, and signaled to a guard she recognized from that terrifying night. He opened a quiet door to an adjoining office. "I need 5 minutes, Ji-Hoon," she stated, her voice steady. "With you. Alone." Dae-hyun surged forward, his face contorted in fury. "You cannot interrupt the council for a distraction. Who is this woman? Get her out." Ji-Hoon lifted a hand. It was a small movement, but it silenced the entire room, including his raging cousin. His eyes remained locked on Mia. "She stays," he commanded. Then, to the council, he said, "Adjourn for 10 minutes. Clear the room." The men, sensing the volcanic energy emanating from their leader, moved quickly, filing out with barely concealed curiosity. Dae-hyun stayed, a venomous glare fixed on Mia and the baby. "This is a desperate trick, Ji-Hoon," Dae-hyun hissed. "Don't ruin the legacy of our family for a lie." "Get out, Dae-hyun," Ji-Hoon said, his voice dangerously soft. Now, Dae-hyun backed down, slamming the main penthouse door shut behind him. Ji-Hoon pushed back his chair, the heavy leather scraping the floor, and walked into the small office where Mia waited. The room was sterile, modern, and quiet. He closed the door. They were finally alone. He didn't touch her. He didn't rush. He simply stood a foot away, his breathing harsh, his chest rising and falling rapidly under his tailored suit. He looked utterly bewildered. "What is this, Mia?" he asked, his voice a low, rough rasp. He hadn't used her name since the night he let her go. She slowly unstrapped the carrier and lifted the baby, holding the tiny bundle out toward him. The baby stirred, opening his eyes. Ji-Hoon froze. He looked at the child, and the air seemed to leave his lungs. Those were not Mia's eyes. They were the same intense, piercing black that stared back at him from the mirror every morning. A small, perfect, infant replica of his own gaze. "He's yours," Mia whispered. Ji-Hoon stumbled back, hitting the edge of the desk. No, that's impossible. I told you." He ran a hand through his hair, pacing the tiny room. "The doctors, the tests, the accident, it was confirmed. I cannot father a child." "Apparently you can," Mia said gently. "It was the night we spent here. One night. 6 weeks later, I found out. 9 months after I walked into your meeting, he was born." "A miracle," Ji-Hoon scoffed, turning away from the baby. "In my world, miracles are traps. Dae-hyun is right. This is a setup. You were hired to create a distraction, a biological weapon to save my position." "If I were a spy, I would have been here months ago," Mia challenged, her voice rising. "I struggled for 8 months alone. I was terrified. I came back tonight because I saw in the papers that this was the final vote. I came back because I believe this child, your son, deserves to save his father." Ji-Hoon looked at her then, truly looked at her. Not as a fantasy, not as a threat, but as the tired, resolute mother of his impossible child. He saw the fierce honesty in her eyes. He walked back to the desk, opened a drawer, and pulled out a clean, sealed kit. "A DNA test," he stated, his voice devoid of emotion. "We do it now. If he is mine, I will give you everything you want. If he is not," he didn't finish the threat, but Mia understood. They performed the simple test, Ji-Hoon's hand surprisingly steady as he followed the instructions. He sealed the samples and called for his most trusted lieutenant, ordering him to take the samples to 3 independent labs, with a 24-hour turnaround on the results. The wait was agonizing. They sat in silence, the baby sleeping again, tucked securely back into the carrier. Ji-Hoon returned to the council, shutting Mia and the baby safely in the private office. He told his family that he had a new element that required verification, delaying the vote for 24 hours. His cousin was furious but powerless against the gravity of the situation. Ji-Hoon didn't sleep. He stood guard outside the office door, fighting the twin battles of logic and instinct. Logically, the doctors were right. Instinctually, he knew. He had seen his eyes in that baby. He had seen the truth in Mia's desperation. The next evening, the results came back. The lieutenant, pale and shaking, handed the sealed envelopes to Ji-Hoon. Ji-Hoon dismissed the man and walked back into the office where Mia was nursing their son. He didn't even open the envelopes. He simply threw them onto the desk, the heavy paper thudding softly. "The results are in," he stated. "But I don't need them." He finally looked at his son, truly looked, and the mask of the ruthless leader cracked. A raw, profound emotion, something close to awe, washed over his face. He reached out a trembling finger and gently touched the baby's tiny cheek. 99.9% match, he whispered, a tear escaping his control and tracing a path down his cheek. "It's a miracle." He looked up at Mia, his eyes dark with sudden, overwhelming protectiveness. "My family is waiting. My cousin is plotting. My future is settled." He scooped up the envelopes and opened the door. He strode into the council room, throwing the lab results onto the main table. "The vote is irrelevant," he announced, his voice booming with renewed power. "The bloodline is secured. I have an heir.